The Night Watchman starts his tour at the market square in Rothenburg, Tauber, and takes you on a journey through everyday life in the Middle Ages. He experiences a lot as the protector of the old town and tells of the habits of the citizens of Rothenburg and the stories from the 30 Years' War when General Tilly conquered the city. In an entertaining way, you can immerse yourself in the living history of Rothenburg Tauber in just 1 hour. So come along and enjoy the tour with us.
First of all, I want to give you an idea about the duties a night watchman had back in the old days. Their main job was to guard the city at night. They were out in the streets like police, taking care of the city when all the others were sleeping. Sure, that was dangerous, because all the good people were at home. And those who were still out in the streets were the drunken folks and thieves. Maybe even envy. That's why it was dangerous. And night watchman had to carry this kind of weapon. It's called a helper. One can do a lot of things with it. It's for multiple use. There were 6 of us. Now it's just me, the only one who's still around, still doing. Thank God. I had to get rid of the other 5 to make a living. But that's long ago. Another duty night watchman had, that's why they got the horn, was to give a loud signal when there was a fire at night. Do you want to hear it?
Yes.
But do you see any fire? Okay. That's small. But it counts. It was like... Well, loud enough to make everybody wake up. It was close enough. And all the people who heard the signal ran out of their houses, trying to fight the fire as quick as possible. It was the biggest fear people had. Nothing worse could ever happen to a city in the old days but a fire at night. It was surely good to know somebody's out there. Night watchman's on duty. His quick alarm could save people's lives, could save the whole city. That sounds like it was an important profession, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it's true. It was important, but at the same time, it was considered a low profession because people were superstitious. Back in the Middle Ages, they feared the night and the darkness. People believed in all kinds of spooky things going on at night. And night watchman was with all this, with the dark element. And that's why it was considered a low profession. I know it's not logical for us now, but it was for people back then. For them, that all makes sense. By the way, guess who were the 2 lowest professions? Who was on the very bottom of the social scale? Hangman, that's right. The executioner. He was the lowest, and the second lowest was the gravedigger. And they liked to work together, these 2. They had the same clients. The third lowest was already me, that watchman in Tauber. And not to forget 2 more things, that watchman also were lamplighters. They lightened street lamps in the evening when it went dark. And they had to check if the doors of the houses were all locked. That's what a night watchman did. All over Europe, all the cities, like here. And we had them here until 1920. Quite a long time. The real night watchman existed in Rothenburg. Doesn't mean I'm not real. It's my main job since more than 20 years. And everything's better now. I admit. Work time is much less. Not all night. Pays better too. Thanks for coming. And it's not dangerous at all like it once was, because you all come with me. So I feel pretty safe with all of you people. And after this intro, it's almost time to leave. Just one last remark. You know, there's a lot of history coming up in this hour about Rothenburg and the Middle Ages. You can never, ever keep all this in mind. And why should you? I put it on a DVD. Yes, I narrated it. It's playing on hour 15 plus a bonus track. It's the American system. And it's way more than the tour. It's like the extended tour, including live action, archive material, the right music. It's like watching History Channel, starring me. I just wanted to let you know. It's available at the end for 15 years. And now enough for the beginning. Are you ready to go?
Yes.
Right, now let's go. Well, I admit this wasn't a long haul. But when you look back where we started, you can see how the market square is surrounded by a lot of big houses. Some of them are from the 14th century. A huge building right upstairs. It's our town, an impressive building. Cathedral and a church. All this talk means this was a rich city. And all the buildings that are mentioned still show the wealth Rothenburg once had. And there were three reasons why this was a rich place. Our main economy was our territory. There were 400 square kilometers of fertile land, 180 villages on this land. This all belonged to Rothenburg City. A lot of good land with all kinds of food. And almost every year there was a surplus of grain, wine, wool that we could also export because it was more than we needed for our own. Reason number two were two important trade routes. And Rothenburg was right next to it. One was coming from Prague to Paris, east-west. And the other one from Scandinavia down to Rome, Italy, north-south. Nowadays, that's the Autobahn A6 and A7. Intersection about 20 miles west from here. But back in the old days, when they got the trade routes, this intersection was just 300 yards outside of our main gate. And sure, that was perfect. Because a lot of merchants, pilgrims, travelers, being that close, dropped in, spending time and money in our city, like now. Huge. It started early, having all these foreigners in. And not to forget the third reason, Rothenburg had a special status. It was a free imperial city from 1274 until 1802. It was a state in a state with its own city government. No duke or bishop above, just the king himself. But the king was far, the empire was big. And as long as we paid our taxes right, we could do our thing. Nobody threw obstacles in our way. And there were 6,000 inhabitants in the 15th century. At this time, Rothenburg was one of the 20 biggest cities in the Holy Roman Empire of German nation. And we had a time of glory from 14th to 17th century. But then, all of a sudden, everything stopped. And this city fell asleep for 250 years. Time stood still. Nothing happened anymore. There was just hope. Things were very extreme. In our history, it really went up and down. But I'll tell you later about it. It's too early for the sad story.
Please watch me.
There you go.
Now we are here in the main street of Rothenburg. This is the widest lane in town. When you look back, you can see it. And you can see there are lots of big houses right and left. The rich and noble people like to live here and around the market square. They were called patricians. The rich and noble family. And the biggest privately owned building in the whole city. It's right opposite. It's that green one. There's something special. Next to the entrance, there are these chains with a handle. These were the doorbells, like people used to have them long ago. If one pulls there, the bells inside ring. But not anymore. Because everybody tries. And the people who live there, they don't like them. They fix them. Interesting detail is, those who own the house and live inside are descendants of the noble family that moved in more than 300 years ago, in 1663. And they're still in there. Not the same people, but the same family, which is really amazing, even here. And here's something else very typical and very obvious. All the big houses have it like they have. I mean the wide gate. It had to be so wide that a carriage could drive into the courtyard. Imagine a big courtyard behind a big house. People got a barn and a stable there, animals and vegetables. The city in the old days was like a big village. Sure, it didn't look like one, but it smelled like one. And even worse, because there was a tannery and a skinnery in town. The stench coming from there was really outstanding. And the streets were out of dirt, no cobblestones. The animals were in the streets. Thousands of poultry doing their part everywhere. And the people were throwing it out of the window. Everything. In the early morning, it was kind of dangerous. Walking the streets. Because after people got up, they emptied their chamber pots through the window into the street. And they were told to give a short warning before, like, Gardy Lou! And seconds later it happened. And it's kind of tricky too. Because when somebody shouts down, people in the street look up. And it was all in the streets, all that dirt and crap. Just one idea to get rid of it. They used to have a gutter in the street. Twice a week, everyone had to sweep the dirt laying in front of his house into that gutter. Then they hoped for next rain to come and wash it downhill in the moat or in the valley. But that was more hope than a good idea. It didn't really work. In July, August, when it was hot and dry, nothing went downhill. But it stank so horrible that all the rich people who could afford having a solid house in the countryside went out of town. And because of all the dirt in the streets and the stored food in the houses, there were all these rats. And what happened because of the rats? Plague. Bubonic or black plague. It was a special kind of flea, living on rats. The flea got this bacteria, killing all these millions of people. And it had started far from here, in Mongolia, and over the Silk Road. This disease made its way down to Russia. And when they were loading up ships with goods from the Silk Road in Crimea, determined to go to Sicily, these rats went on board as well. And a lot of these ships were ghost ships, because the whole crew died on the way. But a few made it into an Italian harbor, and there it was. That's how the plague came to Europe. Between 1347 and 1352, in just 5 years, at least a third of Europe's population died. That was dramatic. And one thing made it even more severe. There was a little ice age from 1300 until 1850. And especially in the very beginning, in the first half of the 14th century, it was extremely wet and cold in mid-Europe. In the winters, the rivers were frozen, and in the summers, there were no summers. It was raining and wet, and there was like no harvest. People were starving. It was terrible for not just a few years, for like 2 decades. People were absolutely weak. And then the plague hit them. And that made the number of victims even higher, because they had no power. Average mortality in cities was about 40%. On the countryside, even worse. There were areas, not just villages, which were empty, because the plague took them all. And these villages fell back to nature. The wolves came back, lost forever, deserted. And the hardest thing was, there's something harder, hard to believe. There was no priest when they died. They got no last rites. Those priests which had money, they were hiding on the countryside, isolating themselves, trying to survive. Pretty smart idea. But they were not on front, where they were needed. And these little monks and priests, they did their job. They went to these people, helped them dying, but that meant being amongst the first victims. It was contagious. And there weren't that many priests in the city. Pretty soon, they were all gone. That meant for all the others, no last rites. And that meant going where? To hell. For eternity. This was the drama. Not to die, but like this. That made this disease so terrible. And we cannot imagine what kind of fear that was. Rational as we are nowadays about this kind of things. More or less. But one thing now was brand new. Because of all these people had died, the feudal system didn't work anymore. All these landowners and aristocrats and dukes, they held people like slaves, gave them no rights, let them work for nothing. And now there was a shortage of labor. And those who survived the plague, they stood up and they said, hey, wait a minute. I don't work for that money anymore. Gotta pay me better. There were riots against the landowners. They stood up for their rights. That was new. And at the same time, the authority of the church was going down. Because the church could not explain why the plague happened and why millions had to go to hell and they couldn't stop it, or had no good explanation for it. So there were two things coming together. The poor class stood up and the authority of the church was going down. The so-called Dark Middle Ages were over. A new spirit came up. Renaissance was born. And later on, Reformation came out of this and the Peasant War. So a lot of dramatic changes in society are based on that loss of people during the Black Death. Something very terrible and horrible caused something very dynamic. Short after. Well, when I talk about Middle Ages all the time, I can spring from 1300s to 1900s. It's a wide range. And one could classify it into sections. I don't want to do that. There's only one thing I want to tell you. No matter when, all through the Middle Ages, it was never easy to make a normal life like we do now, most of us, 90%. We have enough food, enough living room, whatever, the basic things are okay. But not in the Middle Ages. Diseases came again and again, not just once. After the plague went, smallpox were coming. Every century had its drama. Wars, hunger. People could die from simple infections like bad teeth. Life expectancy was low. I just want to say one thing, and I think you agree. There were no good old days. There is something about it. It's one of the 6 gates of Rothenburg. It was the safest one. No enemy could come up from there. There's just a park and a cliff. We'll see that pretty soon once we get outside. Safest gate and the oldest one as well. It's from 1350. The gate, the tower, the whole construction. And there's something else special. Once we walk in, you will see that in the first big door coming up is a small door cut into the big one. They called it a manhole. And they called it so because when the gatekeepers opened it, the hole was just big enough for one man to fit through. That's why manhole. Makes sense, doesn't it? It was in every city on every gate, always for the same use. It was for residents who made a certain kind of mistake. Guess which? That's right. Out too late. Missing curfew. It was last chance for latecomers. You know, it was too dangerous to open a big gate at night. Why should the whole city get in danger for a latecomer? The danger was an enemy could have tried to get in the same moment when the big gate was open just for a minute. It didn't need a lot of enemy to destroy a city. A few of them were enough. The only thing they had to do was to start a fire, burn it down. There was a permanent threat. People had to think about security all the time. And sure they did. Every evening, with beginning of darkness, that means different in the seasons, all the bells were rung from all the clock towers to inform everyone who was still outside to get back in. The bells gave the signal. People knew when it was time to hurry home. They had an hour to make it. If they missed it, they had a problem, because all the big gates were shut for security reasons. Last chance then getting in was through the manhole, but it was expensive to use it. The gatekeepers asked for a fine, because without a fine, everybody would have been late. Every 5 minutes, people would have knocked at their door all night through. But once it's expensive, it's different. The fine educated people to be back in time. And one more thing, it was not only for the residents, but also for the animals. You know, all the bigger animals from the height of a sheep on, they were brought out in the morning on the meadows outside with shepherds. They took care of them. And when the bells were ringing, in that hour, they brought them back. But there were so many, there was a schedule of arriving. Every person was allowed to have 2 animals. Butchers got 40. And there are a lot of people living in town, like 6,000, I told you. So. Lots of animals out there. So first the sheep and the goats were coming. 10 minutes after the pigs, and after that, the cattle walked in. And they brought them just to the gate, and then they ran into town and found their way home. More or less fast. No enemy tried to get them, only by once. There was a chance for an attack. And that's where the high wall is with the rain. There all the people were standing on a high position, on the wall, shooting down on all this enemy. Our main enemy were the neighbor cities, the Bishop of Würzburg and the Count of Nuremberg. To mention just the worst 2, because they tried it so often, but they never made it. Not the 2 I mentioned, and not all the other enemy we had. This city wasn't taken until the 30 Years' War, which lasted from 1618 to 1648. And there's one detail you should know. We got the city rights 1274, and Rothenburg was conquered first time in 1631. Not bad. But then it happened in only 3 days, and it was changing everything. The one who did it was General Tilly, leader of the Imperial Catholic Army. And short before he came here, he had burned down the city of Magdeburg, which is in the east of Germany, leaving nobody alive. The biggest massacre in the 30 Years' War was then. He destroyed the city completely. And then he moved over here with 40,000 men. And they've shown up outside of our walls. And they had two plans. One was to bring us back to Catholicism, Counter-Reformation. We were Protestants. This was a bloody thing, you know, not arguing. It was different. Plus, they had to have a winter quarter, because the weather was terrible. It was raining since days. They got hundreds of carriages and wagons. They had to have a dry spot, enough to eat. That's what they wanted. And, you know, this was a free imperial city and brave people. The city senate said, no way. We don't want this. We don't want to lose our belief, and we don't want to have 40,000 in the city. So everybody who was able to carry a weapon was called on the towers and walls, and the fighting began. And it didn't work. There were too many of them. We were just 6,000. Outside 40,000 fighters, mercenaries, and they got this big cannons. When we built our wall, these kind of cannons were not there. So the wall is kind of thin. It was thick enough when they built it, but decades later, the wall didn't grow with technique, you know. It was still the same wall. So they were able to shoot from a distance against our walls. And we were shooting back once they came close enough. It wasn't a fair battle, but anyway. On the third day of the attack, we ran out of gunpowder. Plus, the wall was really damaged already. And then something extra stupid happened in addition. It's hard to talk about. One of the defenders, a peasant, was told to go and check out how much gunpowder we still have in the powder tower. Well, he did that. He went in, but with a torch. You know, that was it. He blew it out. There was an explosion and a gap in the wall that we made. Now we surrendered immediately. Hoping for mercy, we opened the gates and they came in. But there was no mercy. We had killed more than 300 of them, while we had lost just 2 people so far. One was the guy with the tools. The other one was standing too close. And then his troops were here for 3 months, not only in the city, also out in the villages, killing hundreds of our, bringing diseases in. And for sure, Rothenburg was plundered, empty, nothing left of value. But they didn't burn it last. After 3 months, they went, and Rothenburg still stood. But the war continued another 17 years. And 2 more times, Catholic troops were showing up outside, and we just got into negotiations. We couldn't fight and defend the city anymore. We paid a high ransom so they would not burn it down. But again, these troops were in the city, and they brought the plague. Every day, 8 to 10 people died for 3 months by this. Only by that. It was horrible. And towards the end of the war, you couldn't tell who was friend or enemy. They were just bandits and marauders trying to plunder and steal as much as they could. And they did. Rothenburg suffered so bad that when this war was finally over, this was a poor, forgotten place. We had lost half of our people in the city and in the villages. And we never recovered from it. For 250 years, time stood still. What our craftsmen produced was not enough for any export. It was just enough to supply the people who were living here. That this is hell. It's named hell. And it's coming from a time long ago when a part of the street back there where we come from looked a little different. And you can still see from here, there's a high wall on the right-hand side, at the end of the street, and a huge building behind. You got a lot of green outside. It was a Franciscan monastery back then. And from the wall of the monastery to the outside wall, this place was closed. The street was like a tunnel. No light came in. So they called it hell. The street. That's how the name came up. And the name of that building is just reminding of this old street. And even this is hell, it's still a nice place. Because World War II. I think most of you don't know that Rothenburg was bombed by the American army in March 45. And it was destroyed by 40% within the old walls. It happened for a special reason. A few weeks earlier, Nuremberg was bombed and mostly destroyed. It's a big city, 50 miles south from here. And there was a German general who left bed at Nuremberg, escaping into Rothenburg, with all his Nazi soldiers, giving order to hold this city to the last man. The front line of the American army was very close, just a few miles north from here. And sure, they found out what's going on, that all his troops were in here, and what kind of order was given. And so it happened. On the 31st of March, 1945, there were 16 military aircrafts getting up in the air. And their main target was not Rothenburg. It was a gas depot of the Nazis about 70 miles northeast from here. But it was so foggy there, they couldn't see anything. And for that case, there was always a secondary target, which was unfortunately Rothenburg. Now they flew over here, and it was kind of foggy here as well, but they dropped these bombs down, and they hit the eastern and northern part of Rothenburg, within the walls, but not the heart of town. Where we went around tonight on the tour, for instance, there was no damage, or down south, or there, in this direction. But unfortunately, bad enough, northeast was destroyed. And the next plan was to destroy the rest of Rothenburg by artillery. General Devers of the American army was preparing that. And he was nearby in a village with his men, and they were ready to go. But then he got a call. On the other end of the line was John J. McCloy. He was Deputy Secretary of Defense and High Commissioner for Germany. And he knew about the beauty of Rothenburg. He knew it's a medieval city, and he kind of liked it. But he never had been here before. You know who was here? His mom. As a tourist in 1914. She took a painting of Rothenburg back home. It was on the walls of his parents' home in New York. He grew up with that painting, and he loved the stories his mother told him about this medieval city. He was so fascinated as a boy that he never forgot all this for his whole life. And then much later, as an adult, he was in charge. And when he heard about this news, that Rothenburg should be totally destroyed by artillery, he called his general and he said, "Listen, Devers will not destroy Rothenburg if they surrender. It's a medieval city. Let's give them an option." And so it happened. Because he got involved in the right moment, we got this kind of choice. And the best of all was, when this news was coming in about this option, the German general was not in town. Perfect timing. He had forbidden any negotiations, like Hitler had forbidden it to all of his generals, even at the end of the war. But as this guy wasn't here for a few days, there was a substitute command who was Major Termes, and this guy was smart enough to understand that the war was almost over and surely lost for Germany. And he was brave enough to tell his men that he will hand the city over. And sure, that was treason. He would have been shot immediately for this. He took a high risk because he couldn't trust his own men, and he didn't know when the general was coming back exactly. It was a risky thing indeed, but he did it. He went out of the city walls down in the valley. And maybe you have seen it when we were in the park, and when you look down, you can see there's a stone bridge down there, above the creek, the Tauber. And down on that bridge was a military vehicle of the American Army with a white flag on top, and 2 American officers and a few privates inside waiting for an answer. Yes or no. Or no answer at all, which was more no. So there were not too many options, just 2. And this German major did the right thing. He went down to these 2 waiting there, and he said, "It's your city. I hand it over. I'll be gone in the morning with all my men, I guarantee it." And that's what happened. The German troops went out of town. The American army occupied it the next day. 5 weeks later, on the 8th of May, the war was over in Europe, and we still had our city. We lost a part of it, but not the heart of it. Because of this too. An American and a German, they both saved Rothenburg from total destruction. Then the war was over. And by the way, nothing happened to that German major after World War II. And John J. McCloy came to Rothenburg in 1948 to be awarded a Citizen of Honor. But we still had a problem. There was no money to reconstruct the destroyed part of the city. We lost that war. This was a bankrupt country. There was no money at all. But people in the city here had a good idea. And you know, that's what you should have when you don't have any money. A good idea. Which was in this case asking the whole world for help. There was an article written by our tourist officials, and it was sent to every bigger newspaper worldwide. In this article we said, please, you people out there who are friends of Rothenburg, Germany, the only thing we need right now is money. And we said, please help us, send money in. And if you do, and it's a certain amount, we'll put your name on our wall. We offered that one could buy a meter of our wall symbolically and have his name there. That's what you see when you walk on the ramparts. Have you done that? Then you've seen it. Hundreds of names on stone planks from all parts of the world. First the name of the person, then his city or country, and then how many meters one bought. It started with 80 marks in the mid-50s. Now it's like 1,200 euro. But 60 years of inflation. Explain that. And you shouldn't miss walking the wall. It's a highlight, open night and day, free of charge. And this is a safe little town. There's no crime at all. So if you people cannot sleep tonight for any reason, you better walk the wall. Or go to hell. Well, you see, we are back where we started an hour ago. This was the Nightwatchman Tour. Hope you liked it. And last thing you should do before you leave was to put the money in the head for the tour. It was €8 for adults, 4 for students, no charge for kids under 12. And I got some DVDs with me with all the details, €15 for that. And I'm ready now, and thanks for coming. Good night.